Welcome to Season 3 of RecLess, the podcast making you smarter and more knowledgeable about the field of parks and recreation. Your hosts are Shane Mize, Jay Tryon, and Tom Venniro, three career-long friends from around the country who are joined by a surprise guest each episode. We're glad you're here. We hope you enjoy the ride. This is RecLess.
Welcome to RecLess. My name is Shane Mize. I know I screamed at you again. Tom didn't like that. Sorry to our 12 listeners. But my name is Shane Mize, and I'm this week's host of Fuck off. I'm this week's
Restless.
Yeah, that's a different
You're
podcast
the
I have.
host.
I'm this week's host of RecLess, and I've got my good buddies with me, Tom and Jay. What's up, fellas?
Hey, Shane.
You want to start over?
No, well, the worst part is it doesn't
No,
matter. Hannah will
no.
keep every ounce of that in. I can't get her to take that out if I wanted to.
Feels like you opted not to say our last name just in case.
Hedging my bets at that point. Oh man, how are y'all doing? Y'all recovered from an RPA? That was a fun week.
Yeah, it was a great week, and it always is, and definitely does not ever disappoint.
We definitely saw each other a lot that week. Was that too much? Should we have taken a week off before we did this podcast? We're all good.
No, we're good. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, no, this is good. Well, I've got the guests and they're waiting, and you can see for our fans at home, they've named themselves Diamond Dogs, and they have a smirking, mustached man with a soccer ball that I believe most people would know as Ted Lasso.
I know who that is. I know you're saying that, thinking I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't watch the show. So
I've never watched it, but I know who he is.
Don't get salty with me, mister. Maybe we did need another week off. Jay's already back. He's back to mid-podcast form. But I wanted to start out like we always do with a little bit of banter. This one will be interesting because I will not be able to participate at first. Sometimes I give y'all a minute to think because mine is actually tied to our guest. There are people in our industry that when you look at one reason or another, they just remind you of your career arc. They remind you of something that's very similar to you. Maybe they've taught, they've worked in big or small communities, or they have the same education path that you did. But somebody in our industry you think of and you're like, man, that's unique. I have the same, there's some overlap there between me and this individual. So I wanted to know who that is for y'all and why. And like I said, I normally step in and give y'all a minute to think, but mine is this guest, and all of the hints will lead you to guess if you can figure that out. So you don't get any grace on this one. It could be Mike McCarty. Just looks like Tom, right? That could be Tom.
I don't have anyone that comes to mind.
Really, knowing that whether they've started an agency or done the similar path to you, or you don't see them in the industry and you go, oh, that's interesting. They've taken the same path as me. We have a lot of similarities, whether it's schooling or ideas or thoughts on how you would run a department. Nothing.
Those are all different things.
Sure.
Like
you're not going to find someone with the exact same profile, but there's got to be someone that reminds you of somebody that you're like, we see the thing similarly.
When you just said like someone that might run a department similarly is very different than the path which was the original question.
Sure.
And because like the path, everyone's path is unique, and there might be some similarities that people have of whether it's starting a department or, coming from a department. There's a ton of folks around this country that came from Mecklenburg County. So obviously like there's people that I can relate with in that regard. Like, Atuya and I have roots.
That's a good one.
From Mecklenburg County. Phil Fleischman, also North Carolina director, had roots in North Carolina. Rion, who is the director now in Charlottesville, Virginia. So there's just a lot of maybe Mecklenburg County roots that I could always revert back to. Not everyone has left the county and came back to the county. So that's where I'm a little bit unique in that I was there for 7 years, left for 5, came back for 5. So yeah, maybe, I could.
You have any connection with other people that started a department? Yeah, that's pretty unique. Like there's not a lot of people out there that have started a department like you did.
It's interesting. There's been a few folks that I've been introduced to over the years. Most recently, I got an email from Cindy White, former guest, who reached out, and this is actually a really cool story. So someone reached out to Cindy who heard Cindy on the podcast,
That's interesting.
and then that person in some fashion heard of my story of starting Indian Trail and then reached out to Cindy and said, "Hey, can you connect me with Jay? Because I'm doing that right now." And his name's
Mm.
Cameron. He is a one-man show in the town of Sebago, Maine.
Oh, wow.
And very odd story, funny story, how small world works is, my wife is from Maine. We got married in Maine, and she actually has family that live in that town. So I connected with him about 2 months ago, and we got on a phone call, and we are just talking about that. But he's right out of college, so he obviously may not have the same path eventually,
Right.
but right now he's going through some of the challenges of starting something from scratch. So yeah, there's definitely folks out there. I met someone at NRPA conference that Tom also met, that was at the little meet and greet that we had. Wasn't planned to be there, but they are a director. Her name is Paula. She's a director in Pennsylvania. And she was originally a one-person show, and then they're starting to grow. So yeah, I think that definitely comes to mind when there's some folks that I've met over the years that might have been introduced to me through one person, or just there's always that path that it seems to be more common now than it was maybe 10 years ago, because I think smaller municipalities that are growing have seen the impact and the need and the demand that the community wants for park and recreation. So when elected officials see that, obviously they might have an urge to say, let's start something. Let's get, parks growing. Let's put out some park bonds, which is really exciting. And if that's something that people reach out to me for the next 10, 30 years, that's great. I would love to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, Tom, you had a little time to think about it. Someone with similar past, interest, impacts, education, service experience. Got to be someone that you think, wow, that's pretty unique. We share some of those similarities.
Yeah, I will, having Jay talk a little bit about the different dynamics and how there's a lot that you could really, or a lot of directions you can go, right? And you just mentioned some of those, Shane. But you mentioned the podcast, and that just triggered an email that I got early this week. I believe it was Monday. And so I'm going to keep it, it's going to be contrary to what I normally do, which is name 30 people.
Right.
I'm going to go with one. And it's very similar to what Jay said. You can really, I think regionally, you could put yourself in a place to see others move around because maybe your landscape is similar with the jobs that are available, with some of the volunteer positions and opportunities that you're able to pursue. And so I'm going to give a shout out to a Naomi Cisnowski. And so Naomi is here in New York State, and she pretty much we met at one of my first or second sessions that I ever delivered at a New York State Recreation and Park Society conference. She was one of those individuals, young, super energetic, came up after the session and just wanted to chat. We connected afterwards, shared some of the slides, and then geez, through some of the conversations we had, she ended up being involved or getting volunteer position with New York State Rec and Park Society. And so Naomi is absolutely a rock star. And what I've seen with her and Jay, she works in your area. I believe she reached out to you, right? She has got a lot of great ideas. Like I said, really up and coming, and no doubt in my mind, she will be a director very, very soon. And so she's gotten a few different position changes in the Buffalo area, which is close to me. So not that Buffalo has the exact same structure, but there's obviously some similar positions that we have New York State that are across the state that are basically civil service positions. So you're going to see a lot of similarities. But what I've seen with Naomi is, she's just grown, right? And she's taken that path where she's received recognition from the state, ultimately turning that and leveraging that into new positions or, again, volunteer positions. And most recently, she's overtaken some really great initiatives. And to be honest, I was asked to continue serving with the state board about 4 or 5 months ago. My term was up, one of my 3 terms in different positions, and I had this is the first time I said no. We talk about saying yes all the time. And I basically said, I've got a lot going on, but that's really not the reason. I'm here. I will help with small projects, but I really believe that there's other people out there that can take it to the next level. And
Yeah.
it's their turn. And Naomi was the first person that came to mind. She reached out to me and she said, "You really don't want that position?" Because I believe I would love to be or learn a little more about the position. I'm telling you, she's taken that position and gone in directions that I don't think I would have ever even thought to. Kind of reminds me of like Katie Mack, right? She's one of those individuals on maybe a national level that I could relate to. Katie has such great vision but she's brought such a freshness to the YPN, right? We've talked about that. So anyway, what Naomi recently did, which was interesting, so I'll just kind of end on this fun story. She reached out to me and the email was NYSRPS podcast.
Mhm.
And so she reached out and the email, I was very intrigued by that. And
Do you tell her you're not a podcaster?
I did. Well, she asked me for advice and I said, well, I'm not sure, what advice I could give you because, I'm just a Parks and Rec professional,
That's
not a
right. That's
podcaster.
right.
But I was really intrigued by that. And so now NYSRPS, like a lot of the state associations, is looking to launch its first podcast. And
Oh, I love that.
I do too. And she came to us first. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I talked about this with my wife, Melissa, and like, oh, what will they do? What kind of podcast? Well, if you really think about it, we're three individuals who host 20 or so episodes. And how many New York representatives have I had? Maybe one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe another. And either way, there's no way I'm going to highlight everything in New York State, which means all of our attendees, all of our members in New York State are missing something, right? There is something that they can take from our podcast and localize that. And so, yeah, that was kind of a really a special email to have come from Naomi, who I know is doing amazing things, but now they're kind of looking to take it into a different direction and join the podcast world and expose New York to all that it has to offer.
I love that we talk a lot about getting to a yes or saying yes or showing up. And we don't talk a lot about vanguarding our time and saying no. When I opened up the new rec center in Missouri City at the time, I had an unprogrammable spot. It wasn't to its max capacity. And it was very tempting to just throw everything that wanted to be in there. But I said no to a lot of stuff. I said no to stuff that wasn't a rec oriented offering. Like there was a class that wanted to do modeling. They wanted to talk about the virtues of modeling, their self-esteem. You learn how to look people in the eye, say yes or no, talks about stature, posture, all this stuff. And I probably could have wrapped my head around maybe it was a park and rec thing, but I just thought, at some point it's going to prevent me from putting what I actually wanted in that space in that time slot. And if they're successful and they're having this huge 7 o'clock on Thursday nights, I give them that spot. I'm never getting them out of that spot, or it's going to be much tougher to move them on, 2 years later, once I find a yoga class I wanted to do. So vanguarding what for you, like your time or your leadership capacity, or just also saying, listen, I've run that race. Like at some point, someone else needs to do it. It is so tempting for a lot of people to just say, Tom can do it, or Shane can do it, or Jay could do it. And we could do it, right? But vanguarding not only our leadership capacity in different roles, but also saying someone else can do this, and I think they could even do it better, shows a level of maturity on your side. And then, you hope on their side that they do find that person. You hope they find someone that actually can do it. Because it's that 80-20 thing, like I was talking to someone, I can't remember who it was. They were talking about the academy and they were at our ceremony, the longest ceremony in the history of the Northern Hemisphere. And they said, oh, I didn't even recognize most of the people in the room. And I said, well, I think just like at times the YPN, just like at times maybe other leadership capacities, there's an 80-20 thing. I think there's 20% of the people doing the 80% of the work in almost every organization, whether it's the academy, or the YPN or whatever other, the New York Referee Association of, baseball officials. I'm sure that there's a group of dedicated folks keeping all of that thing in the air, and there's other people that just kind of show up, and so I'm sure it's easy as people that probably have identified with the 20% to want to continue to volunteer and serve and things, but it's not always the best result, to allow
100%.
someone else to step up. Well, cool. Well, let's bring on the guests. So I'm going to go through the things that I think me and the guests share, and we'll see if y'all can. I think y'all could actually select this person pretty quickly. Y'all know this guest. This won't be a surprise name. So I'm some of my stuff's going to be shrouded a little in a little bit of mystery. I won't give you everything to tip you off immediately. So the first hint. We both went to Midwestern directional schools. So I went to Western Illinois, so that's a Midwest school, and it's directional. This person, I'm not going to tell you the name of the school because I think it would identify a location, but they went to a Midwestern directional school as well. Second, we're both directors of suburbs in urban areas. Both have served in leadership roles of the YPN. Both have worked for former guests of our show. Mine was Jason Mangum, but a former guest we've had, this person has worked under. Any hints? I know it's been pretty vague.
I got a slight idea, but
I have one idea.
Okay. Both of us have recreational facilities designed by the same architectural firm.
okay. Well, that was a tough one.
That gives it away.
Well, I'll say the firm then. BRS. No, didn't do anything for you. Both of us. So, are y'all familiar? We obviously have browbeat the shit out of Working Genius, but are y'all familiar with the True Color test? The blue, green, orange, yellow, I believe.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, we're both greens. So this person is a green. If you're familiar with that. As far as Working Genius goes, we're both we share invention. We're both soccer fans, which might have been a hint from the Ted Lasso reference. We were both mentioned in the Dream Parks and Rec staff discussion we had.
Yeah, I think I'm in there.
With the Jeff O'Shea episode that we had last season. It seems like Tom might know who it is. Jay, you thinking?
I think it's the same person I had from the beginning.
Okay. Well, then I'll crank these out, and I think you'll know it. I am in the 4-child club. They are entering the 4-child club.
I got it.
NW.
Yep.
He's got his first one of a different gender now.
Nate the
That's
Great.
right. We both share the same birthday. My guest.
That happened like 3 days ago.
My guest is Nate the Great, Parks and Rec Director for Excelsior Springs. I never say that right.
Excelsior, onward and upward.
Onward and upward. Welcome to the show.
Diamond
How's
Dogs.
it going, guys?
Love it.
What's up, Nate? How you doing, bud?
Good.
I could have definitely, y'all could
have.
have got to him pretty quick. That was one that I had to try to shroud mystery a little bit.
I think I had it kind of early, and when you said Working Genius and then you kind of transition, you threw me off a little bit, but I was on the track, and I do want to say welcome to Nate, but also that we had a conversation in the hallways of Atlanta. I said, Nate, man, you've been on my list for a long time. Be patient with me, and if I get you a date, don't tell the other guys.
Yeah.
So he played it off. He's like, yeah,
He did good.
That'd be great. He did real well.
So Nate was my guest when Jay went out.
Okay.
And I had actually planned the whole time. I told you I was going to stop somewhere in Kansas, and I think I told Jay to try to put him off the scent. I was like, I was going to get to Wichita and look out for Troutman, see if I could get a room or whatever. The whole time, the plan was to drive down. I'd gotten there Thursday night, went and toured the facility. Nate was working, but I took some photos and forwarded them to him because his firm that worked on this facility is working on ours. So it was a great way for me to see a facility of theirs in action. And then that next morning, I was actually were we in the building by the time we knew that, Nate, or I hadn't gotten there yet? But Jay was like, I don't have any.
You were like pulling in the parking lot.
And Jay was like, I don't have any coverage. And I was like, oh no. So we hung out, we took a tour, we talked to Drake. I gave him like 50 shirts that all of his staff now have. Lifeguards and everybody have a shirt. But we couldn't take any photos. I couldn't send it to the YPN fam chat because then I thought y'all would have known pretty quickly that Nate was going to be a future guest. So Nate's been patiently waiting to hop on and super nervous because we don't do prep questions. And Nate has reached out and be like, what are we talking about? Give me some feedback. And I was like, that's not how we do it. So
we don't know what we're going to talk about.
That's right.
Yeah, just BS our way through it, I guess.
That's right. I told him sometimes we prep someone that we know the other one might not have a rapport with, but I didn't think that we'd have a tough time having conversation with Nate. So normally the host asks the first question. So let me kick us off and get us started, Nate. I thought it was interesting. You had worked under Janet. You had worked under some other Parks and Rec directors you have, an affinity for. And I can't remember. I don't believe this was Janet, but we were talking and you had said something that you said, early in your career, you were a pain to manage. You had basically mentioned like you were a really tough person to manage. And years later, all being a director now, as we've all been in that role, I think we probably could identify with that. I'm sure. I mean, y'all think I'm crazy now, and Tom and Jay knew me back then, but I mean, my beard used to come down to like the middle of my chest and didn't look great. Didn't look like one of these beards where someone managed it well. I'd wear hoodies with the sleeves cut off, cargo pants, like hey dude type shoes. I rode an electric skateboard to work. I was a disaster. Mangum was always trying to hide me from council or whatever. We got into fights. We slammed doors. Like I didn't want to dress up or speak well or do anything you wanted me to do. And so I know there have been different times that people have seen me matriculate up to the director role and be like, there's no way I thought he'd be a director when I first met him or whatever. But there's education, experience, and grace on the other side of that, right? We've all been directors. We've all managed people that probably remind us of ourselves in that capacity. So what was it like managing you? And what have you learned as you stepped in this director role? Because I think we've all thought at times, like, when I get to be a director, I'm not going to do that. I'm whatever that circle is, I'm going to square it. I'm going to fix this problem. And then you get into these director roles and you sometimes just learn a circle is a circle. There's no way to solve it. There's nothing you can do to fix it, but you almost need the clarity that comes with being at that level, the highest level, to really see that type of thing. So would love to get your perspective on what it was like to manage you and what you've learned over the years and how you managed a future Nate when you come across him.
Yeah, so all of you guys, I guess, know Chris Lucas. So he came in, Janet had brought him in kind of from Colorado and was going to come in and run the rec department. And I was a rec coordinator, and I was the guy showing up to work every day, gym shorts, t-shirt, flip-flops. I'm stocking concession stands and running out on the fields and, prepping ball fields and whatever. And Chris came in and he's like, yeah, that's not going to fly anymore. You're going to wear closed-toed shoes. You're going to wear, golf shorts. If you wear shorts, you're going to have branded gear on. And at first, Chris and I battled, choice words and like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to conform to this. I learned more from Chris probably in a couple of years than I learned in my entire career, I'd say.
A great dude. And what a blast from the past, that name, by the way.
Yeah,
he's awesome.
So now, getting the director role, I interviewed for this director job against Chris. So we were both kind of looking to leave Liberty at the same time, and we were both.
This your hometown, right?
Candidates, yeah. So I grew up here. Advantages and disadvantages to being the director in your hometown. But I was like, okay, well, and probably similar to what you do, Shane, with if somebody's gonna show up to work and needs to wear branded stuff, like let's get some cool swag to wear, so they don't have any excuses to not wear branded gear if they're gonna wear a t-shirt or whatever.
Nate's shirt game is as good as it gets, right? I think that was another quote or a hint I could have given away pretty quickly is I've always been impressed with your shirts.
Well, I steal from others, so
yeah,
just like the Parks and Rec way.
Yeah, that's right.
But I don't I always tell staff because I just remember how frustrated I was with Chris, so I'm not going to implement dress codes and all this stuff. Just dress for your day. Like I really don't care. Don't wear anything crazy skimpy or, inappropriate or whatever. But wear your branded stuff. And I mean, if you gotta wear, most of our staff is female. If you want to wear leggings and flip-flops and a branded shirt, so be it. But if you have a big meeting that day, dress appropriately. And it's when you give people the empowerment to do what they want to do and really not disappoint, I think it kind of comes into play. There's not any issues. So it kind of works itself out. But that, for me, that was like a big culture shock because I would come straight from soccer practice in Liberty, coaching high school, and I'm all sweaty and nasty, and I don't want to throw on a polo and golf pants and whatever and work all day. So,
Nate, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question to this that's related. And basically, I had a conversation with a bunch of great people yesterday about seamless transitions and, self onboarding. So when you came into this position,
Mhm.
obviously there's a transition period there. So my first question for you is a two-parter. That's what I do.
There you
So
go.
this is
On
a
brand.
two-parter. The first one is, did you have some support? Meaning, was there the former director there to, you know, be with you and train you or teach you? Some people have that luxury where they might keep a person on who's retiring or leaving for 2 or 3 months with the individual coming in. Some people, they just come in. So that's the
Mhm.
first part of the question. And then the second part is, what was your self onboarding like? So you get your onboarding from whatever they provided on in an official way, but how did you go about it yourself? What did you do to acclimate yourself to the situation in the new position?
So the previous director here actually had taken a job out in Oregon, I believe. So they weren't around. I knew a lot of people from town growing up here, so that piece was going to be fine. But so I report on the Parks and Rec side. I report to an administrative board, and they had contracted with it's a neighboring town's retired superintendent that just had some connections in town, I guess. And he kind of filled that void until I got hired. And they were like, hey, we'll bring him on and he can, mentor you along and onboard you through. Well, I started and I quickly found out he did not really know this industry.
Mm.
And Liberty is significantly larger than Excelsior Springs. So I guess I had worked at maybe a higher level of like the the industry itself of a lot more contacts and all. Like first day I show up, he's not here yet, and I walk into the coordinator and I was like, hey, what's basketball numbers at? Because I just got done organizing basketball league and I had like 240 teams in Liberty. And she's like, 20. I was like, 20, which age division is that? She's like, no, that's the entire league. Like that, that is pre-K through eighth grade. It's like,
Wow.
oh, what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
Steve, the retired superintendent, he ended up getting there a little bit later after I had got to meet with staff just on my own. And quick conversation. I was like, yeah, like I don't know that I really need that much help with this. Like, I think I got a pretty good grasp of what I need to be doing right now. And like, no offense to him being older, but there's a box and I'm gonna pretend like there's no box.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna think way outside the norm, and this is a blank slate here. And already having a good knowledge of the community anyways. So he introduced me to the mayor and we had lunch and that was pretty much his role.
That
And
was the
then
training.
yeah, he kind of went off on his own. And so it was, I mean, onboarding myself, just kind of setting up those meetings and going, trying to get involved with different organizations and high school friends and whatever. So my board president is actually a childhood, close friend. Graduated together, known each other a long time. But my board also, like, to report to them, they don't know this industry. They're well, like Shane and I were kind of talking before you guys got on, like a committee of people. It's okay, you got a real estate agent, you
Yeah.
got a teacher, and they're all over the board. Nobody's actually in this industry. So that's why I lean heavily on conferences too, because like I'm gonna have conversations with you guys and then be like, okay, that's what I need to be doing, or that's a good idea, and I have to manipulate my own goals because I know that they're not going to come from higher up. Different resources, I guess, for a small communities. I mean, we're not even 12,000 people, so.
Nate, I want to go back to Shane's first question and kind of take it in a different direction. So, Shane mentioned, maybe, and you mentioned it too, you were challenging to be an employee to your first manager, first supervisor. Now in your role, is there a type of employee that you thrive with, that you enjoy managing? So, obviously, like Shane and I have always joked about how different we are and our mentalities or our philosophies and how we implement change or do different things. And, on one context, like I love that back and forth that Shane and I have because we look at things differently. And, to go back to working genius, like, I discern a lot of things that he mentions. So as a supervisor or a director that you're in, is there a position that you love to know that individual feels a certain way and like how you thrive in leading different people?
I guess to tie in the working genius, I think people with enablement, kind of, because that's a genius for me. And if I see somebody else doing something, like it's really easy. I'm super easy to galvanize. I hate galvanizing. I want to be, hey, we should do this. Okay, yeah, let's go.
Let's go.
So to work with other people that have enablement is like, okay, there's my challenge. They're out doing this. I can do that better than they can, or
Mm.
Yeah.
we can jump in and we're gonna knock this crap out of the park because we both want to be doing this, and I know that they're gonna get just as much energy from it as I am. And I struggle delegating, but if they have enablement, they're gonna be pretty easy to just be like, oh yeah, come on board, let's go, you know, program this, or yesterday, hey, galvanizer, we need to get people out here. We've got an event in the parking lot for trunk or treat. Parking lot trash needs to be picked up, weeds need to be pulled. You galvanize people and I'll be there. And
Yeah.
and our whole leadership team was out there for an hour and a half yesterday pulling weeds and picking up trash.
What's your AD? What's Drake? Has y'all done Working Genius?
Yeah, ET.
So he's
Two
not
of us
galvanizing
are.
necessarily either.
Yeah, but his first competency is going to be a G. So, and he's a coach
He's a
through and
coach.
through.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's when he pulls in his coaching mindset, like that ties that G in pretty quick.
Yeah. I bet.
Nate, we've talked a lot about, creativity and different events that you've done or different programs. Is there like one event or activity that like when someone thinks of your department that has set your department different than others, just based off of new things that you've implemented since you've been there?
I mean, not one event necessarily, like our Earth Day event that I kind of took on, I guess 8 years ago when I almost 9 years now that I've been here, has grown quite a bit, and I've been able to pull in a lot of sponsors, and that's a big, like our downtown district kind of really buys into that. And now we've got some businesses that are like, hey, reaching out to me to try to almost model it, to do like, hey, we want to do a customer appreciation event where we're gonna go pick up trash at a park for you and, you know, grill out or whatever. But I think probably event wise, like our ribbon cuttings. Don't know if you can see the picture back here. That was our dog park ribbon cutting. And like we did the Jurassic Park themed t-shirts. We handed them out to everybody. And then I made a leash instead of a traditional ribbon. So I
Nice.
made like the clasp for the leash and the handle, and then I braided together different colors of ribbon. And then we did a leash cutting instead of a ribbon cutting.
Did you have a dog chomp through it,
No,
or
I wish,
all
but
right? Well, that's what we're doing then in a couple
yeah,
weeks. All right,
yeah, there you go.
got some
One
fresh
upper,
content
yeah.
there. Ah, that's awesome. I'm glad Jay asked that question. I wanted to go in that same direction with programming, with the innovation. You mentioned being outside the box a few moments ago.
Yeah.
You know,
Tom's got you on a super team. He's going to expect you to do programs.
yeah, I mean, I've heard great
Yeah,
things.
I'll do
We've had
it.
great conversations, and I'm gonna go back to. I love tying. It's just really fun to tie everything together. We've had conversations before, and Jay, this goes back to a conversation we all had a long time ago about esports. Jay's discernment. A lot of people, including Jay at first, were of the camp. Well, I don't really know if people should be sitting in front of a screen and playing on a remote, right? And I know, Jay, I think your tune has changed a little bit, but either way.
I don't think so. I don't think he still likes it.
Nate, you've been successful with esports and e-gaming, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know that's a topic we've been hot topicking for years now, but I don't think there's a big percentage of agencies that have really taken the leap and maybe been successful with it. Can you tell a little bit about that story and what you've done with esports?
I guess I kind of agree with Jay, or I was
Sure.
in that camp for sure until I saw it actually in place where we had a child in a motorized wheelchair sitting next to, the star senior soccer player on the high school team next to a 50-year-old, grandma all playing the same game. Like that kind of was the maybe eye-opening like revelation for me to be like, oh, okay, that's why this is here. Like otherwise you're never gonna get all of them in the same place typically to do something like that. But our esports program, the success of that was Kendra Beaver, who's with KC Parks now. She was the driving force behind that. A lot of departments around the country were reaching out to her,
Yeah.
trying to model, how are you doing this?
Private sector, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then she ended up leaving us and going and working full time in the esports world for a little bit. Didn't quite go, as well as hoped. And now she's back in the good side with the Parks and Rec world. But through COVID, like she would not have, I would have had to have laid her off. There was nothing to do. And through that conversation, she's like, well, we're gonna program the crap out of esports. And she was doing Fortnite Fridays and Mario Mondays and all this stuff and streaming them. And she was, Twitch and all of that. Like she was on there kind of narrating or whatever you want to call it, through people playing. And that's how she got her hours. And there was a lot of engagement. People couldn't leave their homes, and that was how she was able to justify her job through that. But end of March of 2020, right before the world shut down, she had partnered with Sporting Kansas City, and we did a FIFA tournament, FIFA 2020. We had an Xbox and PlayStation down in our gym at the community center. Sporting sent over their food truck from the stadium, and then their stadium DJ came over and was bumping music all night. And then they've sent over their professional. Each MLS team has a professional esports player. So they sent over Alexander, and then Jalen Lindsay was a starting right back for Sporting, and he was here, and they were streaming, playing each other, and all the fans, but participants in the tournament were able to watch, and that was all her. Like
That's cool.
she was a huge soccer fan and made the ask. Like, what's gonna hurt if you just ask? But now that since she's been gone, our esports program is non-existent. Like we've tried to offer some pop-up stuff, and it's just I don't think it has the traction that it did have.
Yeah, COVID
But
had a lot to do with some of the esports success, I think. And I mean, we talked when I was touring, Nate, about Kendra and her going to the private sector, and it wasn't necessarily we're service-oriented people. We're in the public sector because we love serving people. We love putting on programs, almost to our detriment. We'll work late hours, nights and weekends. We'll make, very small budgets really stretch. We'll be the gap in whatever it takes to make things successful. And she got to the private sector, and they had a real apathy towards some of the things we care about in the public sector. And, it's great to hear that she's back in the public sector. But there was a time, I think of a group in Arizona, think there was a group in Alabama or something, that y'all were industry leading in that process, a town of 12,000, and I described y'all as suburban area because y'all are near the Kansas City metro area. You weren't very far away when I was driving through, but I could see it also at times where you might feel pretty rural with 12,000 people as well. You're right on the outskirts of what would be described as a rural part of the world. What was the challenge in that? Because you're all of a sudden trying to not only just serve your community, but in some ways, whether you were trying to or not, you were leading the industry. And you've got a town of potentially 12,000 people, probably at times pretty conservative with their viewpoint of what's the importance of who we're serving and how we're serving them. And all of a sudden you're trying to say, hey, we're doing something that's maybe even bigger than East Springs here. We're doing something that's, industry leading, and we need all the support because it's not easy to get those data ports and the IT support and some of the logistical things that you need to really run a successful esports program, especially in a facility that wasn't designed for it initially.
Yeah, we had to manipulate some space, and a local DJ loaned us some monitors to use, and but you'd still have the kids carrying their 50-inch TV from home, like
That's so funny.
little kids from Little Giants or something, snot coming out their nose, and there's all their gaming stuff. But we're fortunate in our community center that we pull from around 20 different zip codes here. So I mean, we pull from a lot of small communities as well that come to our community to recreate. So that helps out tremendously. So where that 12,000 might be 15,000 because of all the towns of 500 to 2,000 that are right around us. And then we're close to the KC. I mean, we're 30 minutes to downtown Kansas City. So one thing that Kindred did do was it was KC Metra or MESA. So it was Metro Esports Association. And so they started to build it in some of those other smaller communities, suburb communities, where odd months were your home base tournament. So maybe January is Mario Kart, and each home base ran a Mario Kart tournament, and then the even months, the top three from each of those home bases would come together and play in a championship.
Oh, that's cool.
Metro championship. So that was how we were able to get around we don't have the space for it. We can't handle 100, gamers, but we have 100 gamers because we've got 25, they've got 25, they've got 25. And then just rotated through the host, hometown to hold the championship. So that was a beneficial structure for us being a smaller center.
I'm glad you mentioned Kendra's name. I actually went to the Missouri conference, probably trying to think of the year it was. It was
3 years ago. I think Caroline was born
right after COVID, so 2021. And I remember going to Kendra's session. She did a session on esports, and that story that you mentioned with the individual in the wheelchair participating with everybody, that was mentioned. Whether it was the same individual at the same night, I don't recall, but it definitely left myself and everyone in that room with that impact of like what that program can do. Because you have an opportunity to bring people together on an equal playing field that bring not just one age group or two age groups, but ages and genders and races and ethnicities, everyone together. And that's unique because we can't always say we can do that with other programs. So, I'm always going to remember that. And yes, was I a little anti esports at one point for sure? And I still think a little. And it's funny because, now as a parent that has a son that likes to play games, do I push him against it? Not necessarily. Obviously, I want him to be outdoors more and be getting energy out physically. But, I see the friendships that he's made with playing online with other friends. So there's definitely, perks to it and benefits of it. So it's just, you got to look at everything through a different lens. And until you hear that story of the impact, it's hard to maybe get behind something. And I think that's just one example. We don't always tell our story as much as we should, or success stories. So the more we can do that to our bigger audience, the better.
Yeah, I mean, because in our industry, we're always talking about, the inclusive programs or all abilities playground or whatever. But they're really, I mean, you can do it's all abilities T-ball and you're using a turf field and everybody's on the same playing surface. But there's still disadvantages involved. Whereas when you throw, the same group of people in an esports tournament, it's level. Actually, the child that's, bound to a wheelchair is whooping everybody else's butt. So they don't necessarily get that success all the time. So that it was one of those programs where it was, you want to talk about all abilities. Like that was it. There's not another program that we could run that was meeting all of those standards.
we still do esports. We were inspired by what was esports was going on, and we have a couple big screens that we retrofitted a room. And our new rec center that we're building is going to have an esports area. It won't be the space that we originally thought it would be, where it was almost going to be it is dedicated, but we were going to have a room dedicated for it. Now it's like this notch or an area off the lobby that'll have a couple screens and some spots with some computers that will be an esports area, but maybe not as big as we thought it was when we first started talking about the design of this a couple years ago. But what I've seen is that led to the support of other non-traditional programming, whether it was maybe the rise in Dungeons and Dragons, which my kids play at the rec center every week and love it. And that was such a small space. So we still have esports. So we have Mario Kart and things like that that are happening. And we see it's very fun. I've got a game room you'll have a dad or a mom bring their kid, or a grandparent that'll bring their kid. And in that same space is a billiards table, is some golden tee that we have set up, and a couple other of those old school games that we probably would identify with when you walk into an arcade. If I walk into that room and I have time, I'll play a couple holes of golden tee. That's fun. Just freaking hit that roller and see what you can do. Esports, the video games themselves, Mario Kart wouldn't appeal to me much, but golden tee, yeah, I'd waste an hour doing that. And, but what you'll walk into that space, and we'll be hosting an esports tournament, and you'll see maybe a dad or a grandfather playing billiards and a mom or a dad playing golden tee while their kids are on the other side playing on these three screens. So it's been a cool spot in that. But what we added, which has grown as a byproduct, is we put a gaming station, a board station, where you could go check out any type of board games, whether it's a card game or a board game, and you can go grab a table in the lobby or in this other room and you can play. And Dungeons and Dragons started to build out of that. My kids weren't necessarily real esports fans. My son that plays DD also did do some esports, but he just was more into the board game and the process of leading, or I don't know everything about Dungeons and Dragons, but he enjoys it. And so does my youngest. That started with a small group, 8-10 people doing it. And now it's exploding. Like, we have 4 tables in there, and we've had to put 2 tables outside, and we have 60 people every time we do Dungeons and Dragons. And esports is still sat about 15 people the whole time, maybe 20, but it's just allowed us as an industry to lower our standards. Sounds so terrible, but prepare our mental challenges around what we think is quote unquote sports or programming or recreational, and saying, I think when I was first starting, I would have never thought about putting board games in my rec center. And now I couldn't imagine a space that didn't have board games, and we're building a new rec center. And so I think in some ways esports might not have ever reached the heights that our good friend Neil thought it would, or the others in our industry thought it might had the chance to hit. But what it did do is create a niche of people that we weren't serving, that it exposed us to, and we're now serving those as an industry in a couple different ways, which I think in some ways is fantastic. Do y'all do any board programs like that at all in any of y'all's facilities? Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that?
We have a rec center that has a game room that is not a traditional game room where it's pool tables and stuff, but we actually keep board games out pretty much 24/7. And it's kind of it's called the activity room that, we have after school programs that come in there and they're using those games, but it's not necessarily programmed. It's just open space that kids can come in and play whenever they feel like playing.
Yeah, we don't have any programs set aside. I mean, it's similar to Jay. We have, believe it or not, seniors who want to come in and loan out games and of course puzzles, and that obviously became a big part of COVID too, right? Like, how can we help keep these individuals engaged without making them go out and spend a bunch of money? So we do have that. There also is, and I wish I remember the name. I was trying to look it up, but there's a store that opened up really close to us here in Rochester, and we've partnered with them. They've come in and talked to a few of our local events, our regional conferences, and it's exactly that. It's a board game shop and club. So not only do they sell all of these unique games, but individuals go there and they play in leagues, and it's a place for them to gather. And just recently, an individual reached out to me and asked if they can rent a space at the community center for a Dungeons and Dragons tournament with their friends. And I was so intrigued by this. No one's ever asked us that before. And in this particular facility, because I'm not a Dungeon and Dragons guy, and I go like, what do you guys do? Do you guys like play and like have beers? Because there's no alcohol in this facility. He's like, oh
Right.
no, we don't need any alcohol or anything like that. We just want a place to play the game. So it's out there, Shane. You're right, and I think there's opportunity for us to go in a different direction there, and even going back to the esports, that little game shop, that specialized game shop that's selling, but also having tournaments and inviting people into their doors. I think that may have been what's happened with esports as well. We maybe thought that that was an opportunity in a space for us, and it's not that it isn't, but there are specialized spaces. I know individuals who are monetizing their esports. They're not doing that through us, right? And we've
Right.
talked about this. Universities are offering this as majors, and so it's still here. It's a matter of how, if we're really able to tap into it with how specialized it's become.
And that's what we're supposed to do in rec, right? Like, we're not supposed to make you the next Serena Williams. We're just supposed to teach you forehand and backhand and intro to tennis. You should go, if you have the talent to be the next Serena Williams, you probably should leave the rec center and go to a country club and pay for, coaches. Because you're probably not going to reach your capacity at a rec facility. We should be offering entry level classes of all types, and that D&D class that we do once a week, they actually meet at a tavern. My two kids are both underage. They're not drinkers, but they drive over there. They sit at this long table. They play. They buy a drink or Cokes or whatever. Parents are there with kids, and there's an adult enjoying a beverage. It also is a great way to show that you can be an adult and drink responsibly and play a board game and not be a raging, lunatic afterwards. And so they do a lot of interesting programming in taverns and spaces where these communities really start to thrive. That tavern has like a whole wall of board games that you can grab, and they do entry level programming there as well.
Jay, I want to say, on our way back from the Maryland conference, we stopped at a watering hole. We weren't sure where we were gonna, but there was a whole wall, and there were individuals playing, if I'm remembering that correctly. I don't think we stayed there long, but
that place had 200 board games.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, you go, you use it for the time you're there. And yes, absolutely.
I think it's cool when that's, how something like that works out, to be honest. So I got a question, Nate. We have talked on this podcast a lot about the YPN fam. I don't think we've described it really all that much, but, I think our listeners mostly understand that there's a group of us that helped start the Young Professional Network, and we've stayed close. And you're obviously in the YPN fam. You're one of the folks that are in our group, but you weren't there at the beginning, right? You have come into this group in some ways, and you've seen what a tribe or a network or all the cool things that we say about community has impacted both yourself and us. But we were here from the start in some ways. So I think sometimes we could take for granted coming into a group like that. What was it like for you as a young professional, or coming out of your young professional time, going into this group that there were some relationships already started? There might have been even like a hierarchy of people who do and don't respond, or what they say or don't say. And you're having to come into this group, and you have become part of this group. In fact, I don't think of you as not being part of this group, but I'm sure there was a moment in time where you felt like an outsider. So what's that like? Not so much about our group in general, but what's it like for someone who's trying to come into a community space like that and feel comfortable being yourself in that, and not feel like you're stepping on other toes or doing other things, but, merging yourself into what a community is and thriving there?
The imposter. Well, so that was, Chris Lucas was one. I went to my first conference national level when I was a I was not till I was a director. So St. Louis 2015 or 2016 or 2016.
Was that for the good time call
First
moment?
conference. Yeah.
That's a funny story.
Chris was like, hey, these are people, when I was still working for him, like YP calls, need to get on those conference calls and get engaged. So like when you had to, like, I have Nate Williams in Excelsior Springs, Missouri, when you get to the time zone or whatever. But then showing up to a conference and not knowing a soul, and it seems like 5 million people, and I try to remember people's names and try to be, like, I guess, extremely intentional about that, so that people do feel value. And that was showing up to the retreat, I think, the first night. And I'm like trying to remember, like, okay, who are these names that Chris said I need to be, talked to and that are involved in the YP and all this. So that was, I guess, my first interactions with a lot of you. And then Biedenstein, being from Missouri was kind of my safety blanket to kind of get in with some of the stuff. And I think he invited me to the beer share in Nashville, Jay's like rooftop lounge.
Jay had it. Jay was balling that year.
Jay's penthouse, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, Beanstein, what am I getting myself into? What is this?
I think it's
But
interesting though, because I don't know, and I'd love to hear Jay and Tom's feedback too, but this community that we've cultivated, this little group, I don't think I would be where I was, and I don't think I could do it would be tough to feel like I could do this job at times without our group. And I don't want this conversation to be about our group, but I do want the people that are listening to see value in creating a group that you can, whether it's former director school alumni, or it's a group of local people from your region, but having a group of people that you can lean into, ask questions, and also just meet and socialize. And doesn't always have to be about work, has been, I think, the difference in me being successful here and me not being successful in our industry.
This YPN fam, I don't know, if I could have integrated like someone like Nate, you know what I mean?
That'd be tough.
It would be very tough. And having the institutional, I guess,
Relationships that were already there.
Basically being grandfathered in based on being a part of the YPN, since year one. And so, Shane, it's funny you think about, we talk about The Godfather, and, if you want to go biblical on this, right? Like, I was a part of it from year one AD, right? You were like negative, right? You were a part of it in negative years. So
yeah, that's
very
right.
Interesting.
BC.
Yes, you were BC. That's why we call you The Godfather. And so, that's a very interesting concept to think about. But I kind of always transitioned that to my state, right? My state society. When I had individuals that's how I started getting into the networking game. So many people just pushed me in the right direction. I don't know if I utilize the YPN as much for professional advice as I do maybe the personal camaraderie piece of it. We're all doing the same thing, and I really enjoy hearing about your lives and what you're doing and how you live them. I probably lean more on the local and the state for that professional piece than I do. Do you get, you all, I do, but I also really just enjoy being a part of it.
I don't think I ever, Jay, before you talk, I don't think I ever take our group for granted. But I am always reminded post-conference how special of a group it is, and how I don't think I would want to do this industry, this job without it, because the whole time we were at conference, we were together in some capacity. A group of us, all of us, whether you're walking through a hall together, it almost was like every time I walked somewhere, I was walking with one of our community, our 10 or 15 or 20 people that we stay close to year round. And moments stretch, right? We don't hop on a call as much as we used to. We engage the chat less from time to time, but man, we're all there for each other that week. And I don't think I could do this without it.
Yeah, and since you mentioned conference, it's cool because I've seen some other groups that have started to create like a similar bond and connection.
That Molly, Max,
100%.
Cassie,
Jordy,
that group, they're close. Katie Mack is really, that group is, Maria's in that little group too.
Maria. Yeah, I was going to mention that too. I think, we jokingly, I think, called them, next gen YPN fam, right? You know what I mean? Because they're doing it, and they were having a blast too. I followed up with a lot of them afterwards, and Maria just the other day just expressed how special it was to be a part of that group. And Maria was kind of, she already had a little bit of a connection with our group, right? But there's a big generation gap. I'm sure that could be somewhat intimidating for someone like her. So to have a group of individuals who are in the same place almost, and we talk about that all the time, it's very important, it's special, and it's unique.
Yeah. And I would just encourage anyone listening that if you have some folks that you've met over the years, or met, whether it's in your state or out of state, just build that relationship so that you can continue to thrive in sharing information and engaging with them to learn about how they operate their department. Because that's how this all started. It all started by sharing some program ideas or sharing some event ideas. And then before you know it, it is like a family.
You're
And
sharing wins of personal, you're
yes,
sharing excitement that you're having a baby, or, you're getting married, and it really has grown.
yeah. So the more you can do that early on in your career, the stronger that foundation will become. And the opportunities, both personally and professionally, are endless if you put the time and effort into it.
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
and during those meetings and at conference with the new YPs, because I think maybe because I did see it like as almost an after effect of
Yeah.
like, oh, this thing is kind of established. I'm gonna try to jump in and like mingle and meet new people. And having conversations with Biedenstein, where that's where we kind of created that welcoming chair position that
Yeah.
I guess I
You did that for a couple years,
I
right?
jumped in, yeah, because I was like, hey, there's a group here, and there's these new people that are over here, and they don't know each other, and they're an awesome person, they're an awesome person, they're doing the same thing, and because I kind of knew a little bit about everybody and could kind of remember names a little bit, maybe that I was like, hey, this is a gap that we have. My enablement is taking over. We
Yeah.
got to figure out how to manipulate the space to where they interact. And I think that's where that position kind of came from was, was it Biedenstein, and then Katie came in as the chair, and then Kevin, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So I was the welcoming chair through all of those, and then I got old.
Yeah, they kick us all out every now and then,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We get too old to do it. One of the things we talked about and alluded to it earlier, you were mentioned, was our dream staff. So I'd love to run you through the same gamut we had to go through. So you don't get to choose anyone you selected, and you don't get to choose anyone that selected you. So you won't have to feel like you owe Tom or anything, or any of us anything. But like, if you were going to build a dream team based off people that you admire in the industry, but you never worked with, what would that staff look like?
Oh God.
Got
That's
him.
tough. That
This
is
is the one you wanted me to give you ahead of time to prepare for.
yeah, 'cause that is stumping. Holy shit. Um, so I think somebody that I follow that's not necessarily in our industry, but I think for like to run a recreation division, that Jesse Cole with Savannah Bananas, like
Yeah.
just the innovative, outgoing, like you want a face of your programs and somebody that's, hey, we're running into this battle, like that can jump in and do something like that. Now they're not necessarily in the parks and rec industry, but a similar field. But I think somebody like that running a rec division would be phenomenal, knock it out of the park, unintended.
Nate, I don't know if I'm the filibuster here while you can think of someone else, but just so you
Yeah.
all know, I've reached out to the Bananas to get Jesse Cole on this podcast, and
Oh,
Really?
the door has been shut
Oh, no.
Oh, man.
several times. So
They
So he's probably not gonna be
listen.
a rec manager.
They listened to our episode and realized they're not interested in this bullshit that we're putting out in the airwaves.
Yeah, I'd love to have him on the show.
Maybe someone else already has them booked, and that's why you got the no.
Oh,
Ooh.
look at that smug look on
I mean, his
Jay.
doppelganger, Jay Tryon here is the.
I can
If
see
we
Jay in
ever-
that yellow top hat right now.
I was just
I
gonna
mean-
say, if we ever get on an episode and we turn our cameras on and I'm rocking a yellow suit, you know who the guest is.
Awesome.
Man, this is a hard question.
It is. Yeah. So you got your rec superintendent. Who's your AD?
Yeah.
Who's your park superintendent?
I mean, I'd probably take my own park
You
superintendent.
can't.
Ah,
can't.
shit, he's so
Was there
good.
anybody you met this weekend? See, this saves you from having to just say your staff. But was there anybody you
I
met this last week that you're intrigued by?
I don't know that I really had many conversations with like parks kind of
That's
division.
something we don't have a lot in our industry, right?
Yeah. Even, I mean, state level and national level, I feel like that's kind of a struggle though, because like my parks and open space manager is a farmer too. So
Yeah.
he doesn't have time to leave and go do that. AD. Maybe now I don't know him super well, but Max.
Yeah.
Like I think that dude, just his energy is infectious.
Yeah.
Like, and I think if you're gonna, because usually I guess here the AD does most of the like work with the leadership team to kind of rally troops and get people going like that. that dude, like every time I'm around him at conference, I'm like, man, like
Yeah.
let's go. Yeah. What wall are we running through? Let's
Yeah.
get it.
Mac's got a presence about him for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Always smiling, and
Yeah.
yeah, he's doing great things too.
Yeah. Uh
Park superintendent.
Parks, I know that's okay. I don't even remember Nate or Nathan. He was one of Kara's students a few years ago. He's an
Oh, starts with a B.
kind of guy. Bibot,
Yeah, starts with a
It
B.
is with a
Yeah.
B. Yeah.
like super passionate about parks,
Yeah, that would be a great one.
nature, and all of that.
That's a
Don't
pretty
know,
good team.
like
that
construction wise or anything, but that kid was at the Indy conference.
yeah.
I think that he
That
was
was
at
Indy.
he seemed like just a go-getter. So
Yeah, that would be a good one.
Well, that's a pretty good group, and I thought you were going originally with Nathan Fort, who
yeah.
was one of
Oh,
our past,
yeah.
one of our
Yeah.
past guests. And I tell you, I don't think I hope I'm not trying to embarrass anybody because it was wonderful. But there's some people you seem to run into a lot at conference, and I ran into
Yeah.
Nathan a lot,
Well, he
just in
stood
random
out.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got his full park ranger
Man in
outfit on,
uniform.
and he
That's
got a
right.
lot of man in
You got
uniform
a lot
costumes
of
and
Yeah, I
some great
love it.
stories. But then fast forward to, I believe it was Thursday. Thursday, for some reason, is a day that they don't have to.
Yeah.
And what do you think he was walking around with, guys?
Reckless.
RecLess tee.
Look at that.
Yeah.
New
Nathan-
uniform.
Yep.
That's right.
New uniform.
Nate got his shirt as
Awesome.
well. Well, Nate, we're gonna do a little rapid fire now. So
Okay.
and you're familiar with this. So
These are personal, not work, right? Is that
oh boy, don't get me in trouble. Don't get me in trouble.
I'm going work today.
Let's
All
have
work.
Jay discern through this for
That's
us.
right. Don't get me in trouble. So you're a Kansas City kid, right? Grew up in
Got a good
Excelsior
ring
Springs.
to it.
Yeah, right. Kansas City kid.
Yeah,
Like
that's a new nickname.
That's right. He went to Northwest Missouri State? That was the
Yep.
Midwest directional school. And then you've worked in Liberty and in the Kansas City area almost, I guess, probably your whole career. So what town or area of the country would intrigue you, right? I know that you're pretty rooted and got your fourth one coming soon, and it probably doesn't look like something you're going to move anytime soon. But if none of those factors were holding you back, what part of the world are you like, man, that'd be pretty interesting to work there?
Carolina. That's
Oh.
I've had
North Carolina fan, right?
conversations with Jay. So I used to live out in North Carolina when I
Gotcha.
was little, and then just one of those random at a restaurant waiting in line to eat, tables are full, and Michelle Wells is behind me in line with the Utah director. And a table opened up, and I turned around. They had their lanyards on as New Orleans, I think. And it's like, you guys might wait a while. You want to just sit with me? Like, I'm by
That's cool.
myself.
Yeah.
And so I had no idea that she was, the director of North Carolina Parks and Rec at that time. But I've talked to her a little bit over the years as well. Just, became Facebook friends, and a couple jobs have opened up that I, was like, oh, that's intriguing. I'm gonna reach out to Michelle and see if she has some background story on it or whatever. So
Hannah and I enjoyed the Charlotte conference. We enjoyed the Charlotte area. We enjoyed going to Charleston, which I know is not North Carolina, but it wasn't that far of a drive once we got there. My cousins are moving. I have cousins that live outside Atlanta. I have another set of cousins. Both of them are from San Antonio, are moving to an area outside of Charleston. And I think there's something super intriguing about North Carolina or the Carolinas. I think it's a pretty cool part of the world for sure.
Yeah, and Charleston's obviously in South Carolina. And Shane, we had a conversation while you were driving to Minnesota. Just a cool little fun backstory. But first of all, we must not have been, even though we've been close, we were not that close apparently in the Charlotte conference, because Melissa and I did South Carolina, Charleston for the weekend, either before or after. And I didn't realize you guys did that. Didn't get the invite. That seems to be a common theme here. But so my wife is a big.
Or you just ghosted him like you ghosted me in Baltimore.
That's right. That's right.
So quick backstory, my wife's a huge Notebook fan, and a lot of scenes were shot in South Carolina and particularly in Charleston. And so we did a whole thing. I'm not going to get into that, but
let's get into it.
Shane's calling me
Did your
from
whole
Minnesota.
wedding around it.
He calls me from Minnesota, or he's on his way to
Iowa.
Minnesota, and he's in a city or town, and he's like, "Isn't this where the Notebook? You've been here before. Where was that, Shane?"
So I knew that you had done your whole wedding around a rom-com,
Okay, it
but I
wasn't the wedding.
didn't know what
Engagement.
rom-com it was. So I see
It's not even a
bridges.
comedy.
I see bridges of Madison County as I'm
Yes.
driving up to North Carolina, and I've never seen The Notebook, and I've never seen Bridges of Madison County, but I know both of them are movies women love. So I thought maybe that was the right one. So I called Tom. I was willing to be a good friend and pull off on the side of the road and take photos of these dumb bridges. That was what I was trying to be as a good friend. I call him and I was like, "Hey, I'm rolling through Bridges of Madison County. Do you want me to take some photos?" And he was like, "Why would I want you to take some photos?" And I was like, "Well, you did your whole fucking wedding around it." And he was like, "No, I didn't." That was The Notebook. And I was like, "Okay, whatever." So I moved on. I didn't take any photos. And then I told my wife that story. And apparently, I guess they're both romantic movies, but one is like a guy going to take photos of Bridges of Madison County and leaving his wife for something else. And Hannah was like, "Yeah, there's no way someone would build a wedding around Bridges of Madison County." It's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize."
Well, and the other side of it, one was made when we were
Yeah.
like 9 years old, and one is when we were in our 20s. So big difference there too.
Lots of yeah.
I haven't
And,
seen either of them, so I don't know when they
well,
were made.
I'm
You know-
just saying it's not very relevant when a movie is made when we're like 8, 9 years old.
I don't know. Well, I
Yeah.
wasn't 8 or 9.
Well,
And
I
you might have
really
been like 30.
Shane just managed to insult at least 3 or 4 different groups of people
Oh,
in
yeah,
his
for sure.
those dumb bridges. This
And it started out insulting Tom, and I was trying to be a good friend.
Okay.
You had
I'll
him
go
at
next.
hello.
Just to move on. Nate, I'm gonna ask you a question that I feel like we asked this a lot season 1, and we have not asked it in a while. But you have a chance to go out to dinner tonight with 3 other park and rec professionals of your choosing, regardless of where they are in the country. Who are you choosing to go to
Man,
dinner with?
they're hitting you with the hard ones today.
I don't know. Can I just do it with my dream team?
Nope.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Same question.
I mean, that seems like I got to get to know these people.
You're hiring them. You owe them a dinner.
I'm hiring them. I don't know who they are.
That's
I don't
funny.
even know how to pronounce
These
last
are the
name.
people you didn't select for those roles. These
Yeah.
are the choice bees.
Oh, well, I made it harder on myself.
Yeah, you did.
Well, the difference
I-
is the one that Shane asked, he was like, you're trying to fill specific roles. This is just like, it can be 3 directors, it can be 3 programmers, does not matter what the role is. Who are you going to
Retirees.
people.
dinner with?
Yeah. 3 Notebook
Uh,
fans,
I mean,
if you're
I feel
interested.
like, do what?
3 Notebook fans, if you
3
want to go that
Notebook.
way.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like actually the lunch on Thursday was kind of that for me. I mean, Shane was across from me. I can't pick him, but
You had Kirschman.
I had Kirschman, who like I've never like formally met until that lunch, but I've heard phenomenal things about him.
Right. Sarah
Full
Sandquist.
Throttle and just all kinds of accolades. And Sarah sitting next to me, who, ridiculous accolades and, winning
She's
all kinds
amazing.
of raffles and everything else. That lunch was
Yeah.
kind of that, where like there were
Yeah.
some of who I would say the best in our industry really are sitting like right there within a rock throw. And now I couldn't hear the.
That was pretty cool, wasn't it? Because there's like
Into the
30 of us
table,
there, but in our own little tables, it was a pretty intimate conversations we were all having.
Yeah.
There was, I think, 24. I counted because I was trying to tell someone that story, and it just organically happened. It was, Shane, you want to go to that Korean deli? I'm going to bring Jordy with me. Jordy was my, and then all of a sudden we get a text from a couple other people, and we end up just 24 people.
Yeah.
And, and then I get there and I knew a bunch of the people who were going to be there, but I also didn't know some that showed up. So, like, Neely was there and Justin Cutler, the director
Yeah.
in Atlanta,
Head,
and
shoulders,
so,
knees, and toes.
yep. So I was right across from him or, kind of kitty corner. And we had a great conversation all about his opening address at the opening, what is it, opening session that they have where
And you had some of your staff. You had Phil and Ryan.
yeah, I had two of my staff. I'm really glad they were able to join for that. So that was a really impressive lunch, Nate. Great answer.
Kind of a scapegoat answer to it, but it
Smart.
was like that was a one of those that how many young professionals really, or even professionals, would have been jealous to have the seat that I was sitting in that day.
Yeah.
Like that was like
That's cool.
I made someone's dinner table, guys. What do you think about that?
yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you
Kind of by default though,
I
because you just
made it.
happened to be
Doesn't
there.
matter. I made it. He essentially said Shane, Kirschman, and Sarah. I just want y'all to know that. I made it. We've asked a lot of people that dumb question. I've never made it. So
We'll have Hannah edit that question out.
Hey, Nate, my question for you is definitely on the personal side. We talked a little bit about this at the conference, but we do ask people individually about their spare time and what they do. And you're a busy guy. You also are, and you're going to be welcoming a fourth child into your family. And I've got two. Shane had four. Shane's gone through it, but Shane's
still
really
has
old.
four.
Shane
Still has
does.
four.
He does, but he's he's got a couple that are out of the nest.
That's right.
So
It's almost
Shane's
done.
a little removed. You've got young ones. I've got young ones. What do you do? How do you stay sane with, well, you're going to have four young ones. How do you stay sane? And what do you do to maybe step away, take a break for Nate?
Grace. He's showing the ground his beard.
I get that.
So that's one thing that I really struggle with,
Yeah.
actually.
I think we all do.
I don't. I work and work and work, and I'm involved in, I think part of that because I am from Excelsior too, I'm involved.
Yeah.
Probably the top half of my resume is in community involvement, and it's so it pulls a lot of nights, a lot of weekend events and stuff like that. Conference is kind of that for me,
Sure.
twice a year where, yeah, you're, droned in and listening all day long on sessions, but then you get that evening where you kind of get that energetic boost of, the networking and learning the new ideas and what others are doing. But I mean, I guess the real answer is that I suck at that. And that's one thing Chris Lucas used to yell at me a lot about because he was one of those that was every year I'm gonna go with my buddies up to Wisconsin and do a fishing trip or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I'm working 80 hours this week. I'm not doing
Right.
that.
Yeah, Chris is into his fishing, and then I used to talk with him
Huh?
about base sports cards all the time.
Yeah.
So he had his hobbies and things like that.
Right.
So nothing, not even like a weekly
No.
basketball league or anything that you just, man.
I mean, I used to play indoor soccer,
Okay.
but that was kind of before, the toddlers
Yeah.
kind of make because the games would be at like midnight on a Monday
Yeah,
night.
that's
Like that's tough. But my oldest is in. I mean, she's playing competitive soccer, so I guess I get that time to go watch. I would love to coach her, but she doesn't listen to me, so
Right.
I don't get to do that. I'm holding out for the 2 and 3-year-old that I can just get them on the same team and coach their
That'd be a
club.
good
But
break.
yeah, but that I coached high school soccer for years as a varsity assistant, and so I would manipulate my work schedule to where I could do 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. I'm director Nate, and then from 3 to 10 possibly I'm coach, and that was kind of time to hang out with the guys, but also like I love soccer, so that was
Well,
it.
So
Now we're getting ready to have 11, 3, 2, and 0. So
yeah,
uh,
3 under 4, right? 3 under
yeah,
4. It's gonna
yeah.
be, bless you. You mentioned you're a huge fan of soccer, and just for my own amusement, can you just please tell these guys to watch a Ted Lasso episode? Maybe just one.
Yes, yes, definitely
I
need to
mean, they
check
think
out Lasso.
Shane's a soccer guy, and I mean,
Yeah,
it's way more than soccer.
even before Ted Lasso was a show, he was like a spoof thing, and he
Yeah,
was the
Tottenham.
Tottenham
Yeah,
coach. Yeah,
I loved him in that.
yeah,
I like the spoof.
yeah.
So, okay. So when Jay selfishly allowed the hurricane to affect him and we couldn't do our episode, I left early from
Oh,
Kansas and got home a little sooner. But we were going to, me and Drake, your AD, we were going to grab some lunch. So if you were going to take us four here on this podcast to only one spot in Kansas City, anywhere
Ooh,
in
in
Kansas City, where would you take us and why?
I mean, it's the best barbecue in the world, so
Come
it's
on.
ooh,
Come on.
ooh.
hard
You're
to
already starting. I'm
hard
already
to
not
pick
interested.
one.
Gosh.
Probably the original Joe's, KC, used to be Oklahoma Joe's. No steak, but phenomenal sandwiches. The Z-Man, it's life changing, but it's in an old gas station. It's still an operating gas station,
I love
and
that.
they run. I mean, the line is through the portion of the restaurant, out the door, and around the building. Typically by 11 o'clock on most days.
Tell me about
So
the Z-Man. Please, you can't just mention drop that name. Tell me it's life
It's
changing.
perfectly smoked meat. It's got the special sauce, an onion ring, and some cheese.
so Hannah found a
Burn
place in Atlanta that does that same thing. It's a burger in a gas station. It was north of Atlanta, but it just had been on Food and Wine's like best burgers of the world or whatever. So we drove up on our way out to try it, and we got in there and we waited in a wrapped line inside of a gas station, and it's a fully functioning gas station, but off to the side they had
and
this little burger. And what was funny is we were hearing people talking about, are you going to get one? Or are you going to get two?
And
Oh,
then
three.
they ran out.
No, luckily, but
yeah.
they were like three's ridiculous. Or yeah, I see what you're talking about. But we thought they were talking about patties. And so we were like, oh, everyone's getting two. So we both got a double burger, double meat cheeseburger. And they came out. They're a little bigger than a slider, but a little smaller than what you would want one hamburger to be. And we were like, oh, damn, everyone here was
Just
talking
kidding.
about multiple burgers. Yeah. So
And
we
like
waited
White Castle
all
style.
that. Yeah, we waited all that time in line, got the burgers delivered to us outside, sat outside of her vehicle, and we ate them in like 4 seconds. We're like, oh, yeah, we've learned and there's no way you're going to wait in line for another hour, and no one's eating
Yeah.
inside, so you don't see the burger, until you're outside or whatever. But great little smash burger, but same setup, Nate, and it was good as well. All right, Jay, Tom, any last minute round robiners?
What's next, Nate? What's the next big project?
I am working on a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant at the moment. Doing a all abilities playground, trying to create something different.
Yeah.
Where they're setting up for an event right now, and balloons are like
Nice.
it sounds like machine gun in the building. Well, but really excited about it.
That's
It's
great.
so a family donated 4 acres that's completely landlocked in this neighborhood. We had one, narrow access point for our drive. And so we've gone in and cleaned it up. But there's 18 backyards that back up to this park space. So named as Boundless Backyard.
It's awesome.
And we're doing like a butterfly haven with little walk trail, picnic shelter, and like a big playground
That's cool.
feature. So pretty excited about it, but the grant
Yeah,
it's rough.
a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, grant for the splash park of 2019, but it's changed even since then.
Hmm.
It's a lot more.
Nate, I appreciate the time. We say this from time to time. We could have gone another couple hours with you, for sure. But appreciate you hopping on. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It seems like we just saw each other a week ago, but
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's hard to have these conversations.
Yeah.
Even
Oh,
at
yeah.
lunch, I'll just add and close with that. Lunch was great that we had on the Thursday. I felt super distracted though too, right? So I'm
Mhm.
trying to entertain or have a conversation here and entertain and have a conversation here, and this is really great. This is such a
Yeah.
focused format for us to have a discussion. That's what I really love about this show.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's
Hey,
awesome.
thanks for coming on, man. This was
Yeah.
great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll see you later.
See ya.
See
Bye.
you, man. Yeah, he was on my list. Took him
Yeah,
off.
he told me.
That's awesome. Too bad he didn't spill the beans last week.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
he had to hide the tour, the visit, and that he was coming on. He held his water pretty well. But I've always had a huge respect for Nate. I think he's super sharp, super creative. And I do a lot of times see similarities in what he's doing. Either I would have
Yeah.
done it, or I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I should have thought of that. I can't get away from how much that I feel like at times either he thinks the way I do, or he's doing what I would be doing, or we're in similar situations or roles.
No, I think if I think back to what you asked us at the beginning, I was taking it maybe more literal from like
Yeah.
a career path,
Right.
but from the thought process and how they serve their community, I think there's very strong similarities.
For sure. Yeah. He's just someone that I'm like, yeah, I get him. I really do. And
Yeah.
enjoy every conversation I have with him. Whether it's, at one of these types of things or at a conference or whatever, but, I think he's great. And I got to tour his whole facility. I got to see all his staff. So cool to see all of his staff, how excited they were. First of all, they were excited he was going to be on the podcast. He had told all of them.
Cool.
But they just cared so much about
That's
serving
cool.
their community. As I'm walking through a building, I would walk to the next coordinator or to the next program manager, and they would share so much about the space and what they do and how they programming. And you could just see the passion of that Excelsior Springs department just beating through their chest. Like it's so cool to see a Parks and Rec department that cares so much about serving its community. It's a great staff. I think he has a lot to do with it as well, but what a great team. And it was really cool to tour that facility. If you're ever out that way, reach out to Nate, any of these listeners, and go get a tour of the facility and see what they're doing, because they're doing some cool stuff out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a fun one.
All right, fellas. Thanks for the time. Till next time.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we'll see y'all later.